a minute. Oh, possibly if I accept the recording message. There you go. The recording message interrupted the tipping point there. Let's try again. So yeah, so it's a little toy model, but it shows you a picture of like two valleys with the ball rolling around in one of them, and those valleys are like different stable states that some system could be in, whether it's a bit of society or a bit of the climate, by making the state that the system started in less stable. And then at some point it's bang, little bits of internal variability that are nudging the ball around, causing the system to tip from one state to another. What's happening there in any system that passes a tipping point, it's because some what we call feedbacks within that system that reinforce change, that amplify change, are getting strong enough to sort of rule what's going on. So a little change gets amplified into a bigger change, into a bigger change, and that's what sends the system off from one state to another. Now, most of the last 15 years, I chose to work on the bad tipping points in the climate, trying to identify those and spot where they were not just changing in an alarming direction, but also where they're starting to interact, which is what this map is all about. But I don't plan to dwell on that this evening. I think we probably all know we're in the climate and ecological crisis, and the real question is, how do we get out of it? So really, how do we act with the urgency that the crisis situation deserves? So that is, in climate terms, it's all about stopping going up the green line here, which is global greenhouse gas emissions, and coming down something like the red line. So it's about reversing a trend of increasing greenhouse gas emissions and achieving a spectacular rate of decline globally in greenhouse gas emissions, halving them by the end of this decade, and then getting them to zero, well, who knows, but certainly before 2050, possibly quite a bit earlier, because what's pictured over in the back end of the century here is probably not realistic. It's a model assumption that collectively humanity would be able to suck massive amounts of greenhouse gas out of the atmosphere. I work on that as well, and I don't believe it's feasible at the scale portrayed here. So yeah, we've got to achieve something like a 7% year-on-year reduction in greenhouse gas emissions globally. And in a rich nation like the UK, we probably should be aiming for 10% year-on-year reduction. And even with all of the pandemic lockdowns in 2020, I think there was only about a 5% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And we're back exactly where we were now post-pandemic, exactly where we were beforehand. So in essence, we surely have to find some ways of spectacularly accelerating the change we need. Sometimes this is talked about in the language of decarbonizing the global economy. Well, that has to go at least 5 times faster than it is going. So wouldn't it be great if we could find and trigger some positive tipping points where the change is going to accelerate and it's going to be self-propelling? And I'm not the only person thinking like this. So this is from some colleagues based in Germany mostly, and their cartoon here of what we need to do. We need to get from business as usual state of society and economy to some other decarbonized state. Their cartoon is using the same kind of toy model I showed you. They're kind of conceptualizing it as trying to lower this hilltop, this barrier between the way we do things now and the way we need to do things, and the transformation between them through these so-called social tipping interventions. But if we're going to believe that this is possible, it would pay to have some examples where it's already happening. And that's what I've been looking for, basically, looking for examples of positive tipping points of abrupt change, and trying to remind myself and yourselves that sometimes society does change really abruptly. So I start with a historical example of social change that means something to me on a personal level, because this is a distant relative of mine, Lillian Lenton, pictured in 1913 here. You can probably tell by the number on her jacket that she's in prison at the time. That's because she was implicated or accused in the sort of burning to the ground of the tea house in Kew Gardens, because she was one of the most active in the suffragette movement. Now, whilst in prison, she was on hunger strike, Lillian. And as you probably, if you know your social history, you know that the hunger strikers were force-fed in prison often, and Lillian included. But they made a nasty mistake when they were force-feeding her. They put the tube into her lungs, not into her stomach, nearly killing her. So then obviously Lillian ended up in hospital, and the government tried to cover up what had happened. They said, oh, she's in hospital because she was on hunger strike. Well, that was a blatant lie, and it became obvious to the public that the government were lying and about what had really happened. And that was one of many events, I think, that helped turn the public opinion against the government and in favour of votes for women. So that didn't transpire immediately. Originally, when the vote is first granted, 1918, I think it's only to women aged 30 or over, and Lillian was still under 30 at the time, so she wasn't best pleased. But eventually, by 1928, we had half, the vote given to half of the population, adult population. So a major social tipping point. If we look in the more recent past, we see classic example of social tipping going on with the climate movement. So it's been understood for several decades, actually, that the nature of political protest and revolutionary change is a tipping point. There is a very strong reinforcing feedback. Greta, by opting to protest outside the Swedish parliament and skip school on a Friday, makes it incrementally easier for the next person to join her protest, who makes it incrementally easier for the next person to join, and so on and so on. And that whole dynamic, as you kind of know, rapidly snowballed. So within a matter of months, it went from one person to millions of people worldwide protesting for more decisive political action on climate change. And of course, political declarations did follow. This is a picture of the European Parliament voting to declare a climate emergency in November 2019. But as Greta would remind us, political rhetoric is not going to solve the climate crisis. Only commensurate action is going to solve the climate crisis. So we need to convince ourselves that there are real positive tipping points of action, and also that action, meaning our relationship with technology, for example, as well as our relationship with ecology, can change quickly and radically. So to have a look at that, we're going to go back into history. I wouldn't describe this as a positive tipping point. We're just going to look at how rapid social technological change has happened in the past. So I'm showing you a photograph taken in the year 1900. This is Fifth Avenue in New York City on the Easter Day parade. And the trick is to spot the one automobile when everybody else is in a horse-drawn carriage. If you're quick, you might have spotted it already. It's over pretty much in the center of the photo, down from the middle a bit. But the next photo I'm going to show you is Easter Parade, Fifth Avenue, New York City, once again. Same parade, same street, same city, but 13 years later. And now we have to try and spot the horse, or the horse-drawn carriage, when everybody else is in an automobile. Can you see it? It's actually in pretty much the same position on the street. Yeah, it's over more to the left of center of the photo. And that's a tipping point in personal mobility that unfolded across US cities in that first decade of the 20th century, and of course carried on spreading around the world. Interestingly, in the middle of that rapid transformation, there was a time when 30% of the early cars were battery electric, with lead acid batteries back then. But there's some kind of accident of history where, ironically, Thomas Edison of light bulb fame talked Henry Ford out of electric cars and into the internal combustion engine. And yeah, the rest is sort of history, as they say. But electric cars been kind of trying to make a comeback ever since. And now we're finally getting towards a tipping point for electrification of mobility. And these characters have got something to do with it, interestingly. So this is a photograph now from 1989. Those of you old enough to, older than me or the same age as me, will know that these are members of the pop band a-ha, Morten Harket in particular, quite recognizable. They're with this professor of architecture from Stavanger, Harald Rosvik, and this is an environmentalist, Frederick Haug. And this car behind, Fiat Panda to you and I, is a special one. It's a hobby converted electrified Fiat Panda with stated range about 45 kilometers, which this enterprising group of characters imported into Norway and proceeded to argue with the then government that they should waive the import tax for the vehicle and waive road tolls and make a whole package of other incentives for electric cars. Essentially, as Harold explained it to me, what they were doing was they were challenging the then Norwegian government, headed by Gro Harlem Brundtland, famous for the Brundtland Commission on Sustainable Development, to put their money where their mouth is. Instead of mouthing off about sustainable development, actually do something about it, instead of just continuing to boost the Norwegian exports of oil and gas that were happily running their economy. Well, interestingly, that little battle did get somewhere, and after some toing and froing, with the support of the media, crucially, because there were pop stars involved, they managed to persuade the Norwegian government, firstly, to waive the registration import tax for the vehicle, but for all electric cars from then onwards. And that's quite a big deal. That's like 20% typically of the value of the vehicle. And then after a few years of toing and froing, where they would drive this electric car through the road tolls and refuse to pay, and then the police would impound the car, and then some good Samaritan would buy the car back for them at auction and give it back to them, and then they would repeat the cycle. After about 7 or 8 years of that, they succeeded in getting the government to waive road tolls for all electric vehicles, and this creates key enabling conditions for a tipping point that's kind of unfolded in Norway, because if you go there, you see the streets kind of look like this. It's all electric vehicles, and it's electric mopeds and electric cycles, and you name it. And this tipping point has finally unfolded in about the last 10 years. So this is some data where the sort of sky blue block is the share of car sales that's pure electric vehicles up to 2020, where it gets up to 54%, having been pretty tiny fraction back in 2010. Now I think it's over 65% on last year's data. So that's the tipping point happening in Norway after all this important early work creating the conditions. Why is this interesting? Why does it matter? I mean, well, firstly, it's important to say that electric vehicles aren't perfect, but they're a huge improvement from a climate point of view on petrol and diesel ones. Secondly, it's real evidence for abrupt tipping point change, and we can look at it another way. So what I've done here with my friend Simon Sharp is we plotted the market share of electric vehicles on the y-axis as a function of the price difference to a petrol or diesel car on the x-axis. So when it's minus, petrol diesel car is cheaper, monthly payment, as it were. Even when you get really close to price parity, still only 5 or so % market share for electric vehicles as of a couple of years ago. But in Norway, thanks to progressive taxes, where they're the same price, bang, the consumer votes with their wallet, buys electric. And actually, the latest data for the UK would suggest we're pretty much on this tipping point now. Market shares up to 20% at least at the start of this year. Why is this important? Well, it's not just about electric cars or cycles or whatever. It's more fundamentally about the opportunities of electrifying transport and the knock-on tipping points. And it's all being fueled, if you like, by the fact that batteries get cheaper the more batteries you make. That's what this little graph here is showing. The more batteries that have been installed or produced for cars or whatever, the cheaper the next battery is to manufacture. That's a really strong reinforcing feedback. And it means that if other countries are following Norway's example and providing policy support for electrifying transport, then this whole dynamic becomes self-propelling, basically. More and more electric vehicles get made. That makes the batteries ever cheaper and the vehicles ever cheaper. And then the whole thing will just tip by itself. Now, road transport, that's a big deal. Electrification of road transport, you're talking about globally, road transport's at least 12% of greenhouse gas emissions, so it can make a huge dent there. But it has these other collateral benefits. If you've got loads of cheap batteries, then it opens up the opportunity to electrify light goods transport on the roads. It could be the thing that finally persuades those pesky oil firms to stop being oil firms, because they're rapidly realizing that they could be sat on a massive amount of stranded asset. They thought they were going to be able to cash in on oil in the ground, but that's going to become stranded asset along with all those petrol and diesel cars. But the most exciting thing is cheap batteries enables the renewable energy revolution, for the reason that the only real puzzle that we all have to solve with renewable power is sometimes when you want to boil the kettle isn't when the sun's shining or the wind's blowing. So you need cheap storage and smart grids and the like. And loads of cheap batteries from electrifying transport tipping point can help enable the renewable energy tipping point, which gives me on to my second example that a tipping
Tim,
point
just
has
quickly,
happened.
you've got 5 minutes before questions.
Yeah,
Really
I'm good with that.
cool.
I'm getting there. So this is the example that in the UK, believe it or not, if you don't know already, in the last 10 years, we've gone from 40% of power generation from coal burning, that's the black line here, up that peak there in 2012, down to almost zero today. And most of the difference has been made up by renewables, solar, wind, biomass, which of course as the taxpayer we've been kind of funding up to now. But incidentally, offshore wind power is now generating cheaper than gas, irrespective of the spectacularly high gas prices, and is starting to pay us, the taxpayer, back handsomely. And that tipping point there was kind of triggered semi-accidentally by the government putting a price on power generation of carbon emissions, basically, in power generation. Not a very high price, but enough to tip the dynamics. And then investors started pulling out of coal, and then utility companies started doing this, destroying coal power stations. This is the one in Didcot in Oxfordshire. So that becomes then an irreversible tipping point. We're never going to go back on that. And the good news is the renewable energy tipping point is coming globally, again, because of what we would call economies of scale. This is showing how the more solar panels we make, the cheaper the next solar panel gets to make. And it's such a spectacular economy of scale that within 10 years, leading analysts say that there'll be renewable energy generated at like a fifth of the cost of any fossil fuel. So the energy revolution is happening around us now. And you can kind of see that if you factor out the perverse subsidies and tax credits there still are for fossil fuel burning and extraction. So you take those out of the calculation, and this shows the cheapest form of power generation by country. And blue is some kind of wind power, and yellow or gold is some kind of solar power, and black or gray is some fossil fuels. And you see that much of the world, even a year or so ago, 2 years ago, in fact, it was already cheapest renewable generation. That's a new for new comparison, it's called. We probably should factor the battery price into that, but even so, that tipping point is coming all the time. And what I've tried to hint at is these things feed back on each other in the economy. So cheap batteries were enabling this renewable electricity revolution. But obviously, if then you can generate electricity at a quarter or a fifth of the price of fossil fuels, that really is a reinforcing feedback to electrify all parts of transport and make clean hydrogen, green hydrogen where you need it for big stuff like ships or trucks or trains or whatever. So these things are starting to cascade, these tipping points within the economy, is the simple message. Now, we should wrap it up. But I just thought I'd finish by saying, well, that's all very kind of techie, but ecology matters as well, and how we interact with other living things. So the good news is ecology has its own built-in reinforcing feedbacks, and ecologists know this because, for classic example, when grey wolves were extinguished in Yellowstone National Park, it changed the whole ecosystem. When they were put back, it changed the whole ecosystem. If people are smart, we learn to work with ecology. So this is a blue mussel bed, does its own sort of funky self-organizing thing and makes those beautiful patterns and stabilizes the sediments it grows on. But humans can intervene with crude technology in the mudflats with a few fences, give the blue mussels something to hold on to, and trigger a kind of tipping point of them establishing themselves in a sort of harvestable food system. And more broadly, I've been working with colleagues on what are other positive tipping points for food and dietary change. So I won't have time to dwell on it, but I think the big tipping point that's maybe around us now is a mixture of people choosing to change diet to eat less meat, especially less red meat, and at the same time, technology substitutes for meat coming to market at a competitive price, so plant-based and alternative proteins. So yeah, to wrap it up, I'm trying to give you a sense that we're not powerless. We can ask, what can I do to accelerate the climate crisis? Well, we can participate in lots of ways, even if just as consumers, but hopefully as activists as well. We don't have to sort of lay our lives on the line in the same way that Lillian did. We don't have to put our life in danger on hunger strike in prison, but we do have to act. And I think the final message is, well, I'm busy trying to turn this into a kind of recipe for positive tipping, but I would say, if you look at history, recent history, the most powerful positive tipping point changes come about through like coalitions of different groups, coalitions of you and I, civil society, with some policy support, even if we have to shame them into it, with some money behind it, and definitely, importantly, with the media on our side telling our story, and possibly a few other elements as well often. So yeah, I'll leave it there because time's probably up. Thanks very much. Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen this many times before, Tim, but here it is again. A lot of satisfied and well-informed, happy people.
Good.
Yeah, such an informative talk. And I love the way you finished there with it's about coalitions and people coming together, and that's what everyone here is tonight. This is why we're here, is to work together to create those tipping points. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I don't know whether you're able to share the slides or whether you can.
I'm very happy to do that, Rob. Yeah.
It was so dense in information. There's so much that to pick up on.
I was listening keenly to the examples of the initiatives you're all involved in, and I think what you already show with what you're doing this evening is nobody has like a crystal ball and knows necessarily the best way to get to a sustainable state for society, but we kind of know what's wrong and we might have some clues about where we want to head. And so we have to sort of learn by doing, and we have to share the lessons as we go along. And what you're doing, kind of networking together with your own little initiatives you were talking about, is exactly that. You're sort of hopefully learning by doing and sharing that learning, even if it's, I tried this and it didn't work. Well, that's useful to share. What I would say just beyond that, the only thing I'm injecting into the discussion is think hard about these feedback loops. Think about cases where you can see one thing triggers a response that reinforces the change you want. Can you find and spot those? We've been trying to do that in Exeter with something we call the Living Lab experiment. And I can already see a few in my own backyard. You may know your own examples. A famous one is community gardens movement, started in the 1970s in the Bronx in New York City. Yeah.
Super. Thanks, Tim. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions. So I'm going to open the floor to questions now for the next, how long have we got, Sandra? 5 minutes. Any questions?
Yeah, fire away, folks. We started a bit late, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Tracy.
Sorry, in the absence of anyone else, here I am. I just wanted to ask what happens in the case of, I dare to say, a futile kind of point, such as something that's so drastic that it seems really hard to find a tipping point.
Yeah.
How do you kind of get around that, if that makes sense?
Right. Well, there are definitely things like steel making, to give a kind of techie example, that are really quite hard to decarbonize or to make climate clean, if you like. So it may be that we need blunt instruments in that case, meaning for that sector in particular, one would have to set a pretty high price on carbon emissions in order to force change. For concrete and cement, that's also quite a challenging one. You'd also probably need to have quite a sector-specific price on carbon pollution. But there are already cool initiatives like kind of substitute materials for building, which some of you will know about. So yeah, not everything is going to be as easy to tip, and that's crucial here. But the good news is, I talked about energy because about 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions can be tied back to energy. And this revolution of cheap renewable electricity, making electricity the cheapest source of energy, the cheapest carrier of energy, will be unique in human history and offers a massive opportunity. And then I talked about transport because that's possibly the next biggest thing in terms of emissions. And then we get to the harder, then we get to the food and land stuff, which I just touched on at the end, because that's like another 25% or something of emissions. Yeah, and there it's probably I think there's some opportunity for tipping, but then at some point government regulation has to step up sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. What I was really struck by too is the fact that Norway's got 65% the market share now of electric vehicles, and they are a Western democracy, developed country just like us. There's no reason why we can't get to that point.
Precisely, and they, as I hinted, they didn't cover themselves in glory in recent decades because they're busy flogging their oil and gas to the rest of the world. But they do have 96% hydroelectricity, in case you're curious. So they are wonderful on renewables and have been for quite a while, which probably helped enable that transformation. So cheap renewable electricity has been available for decades in Norway. The irony is just that they kept exporting their oil and gas. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Mick. Any other questions?
Can't hear Mick if he's on mute.
I've asked him to. Anyone else got any more questions while we wait?
Hi.
Mick to. Oh, here we go. Mick.
Yeah, I'm there.
Go for it.
Tracy sort of woke me up with that particular question because I didn't see the power of it, and that is that cement and steel. I know about cement. There's no steel works around here, and I haven't really thought about it. But both of those industries, you can apply direct carbon capture to.
Yeah.
Now the thing is that economically, you start talking about a carbon price, and I don't know if we've got one. Even
we do, Mick, but it's
pitifully
low. Yeah,
okay.
we have the one. Well, we had one when we were part of the European Union because we have a part of the cap and trade price on carbon, which was bumbling along at rather a low level. We still have a sector-specific price on carbon in the power sector that I mentioned. Yeah. We ought to have a much higher one in these other sectors. But part of my point is that we should have a different one in different sectors. We should have whichever one it needs to tip each particular sector. And the mistake that mainstream economics makes is it uses this flawed paradigm where it argues that there should only be one price on carbon and then let the market, do its magic. But that's a paradigm predicated on only one stable state of the economy and trying to maximize efficiency around the ball being near the bottom of that valley of that magic state. And that's not what we need. We need an economics of transformation. So we've got to get mainstream. We've got to basically challenge mainstream economic thinking in the Treasury, in the so-called Green Book from the Treasury, and in the practices of spending our money, the public's money in the UK.
Yeah. Have you got any ideas of how we do that?
Mick, I'm going to have to move on.
Yeah,
sure.
To Mark. That's fine. Thanks, Tim. I'd like to be in contact with you.
Brilliant.
Cool.
So quick question.
Send you my email.
Thank you, Mick. Quick question from Mark and Paula. Then we're going to go over to Sandra for breakout rooms. Do hang on. Breakout rooms are one of the best parts of the evening. Mark.
Thanks, Rob. I'll try and make this quick. That was really interesting, Tim. I think it lines up with the sort of work Tony Seba has been doing in the.
That's
state.
right.
Yeah.
Rethink X, as they're called. If anyone...
Yeah, and he tends to lean, from what I can gather, that he almost just thinks the market will sort it anyway, whatever the rest of us want to do, which seems overly optimistic. And my question really is around. Is there any evidence when you quoted the early examples about the move to the car, and also the same, I think there's a similar thing with like the telephone as well. But is it right to think that those were both activities that sort of moved and created a new power class? They weren't challenging the existing power dynamic, whereas I think the issue we've got now is much of politics is wrapped up with the sort of fossil fuel extractive industries. So it's not quite as open for change. Is that reasonable?
Hard to say, really, Mark. I mean, if you read a guy called Frank Heels, Gewels, you get chapter and verse on these past transitions, and he would argue passionately that there was very much an incumbent way of doing things. Like with horses and carriages, there's people making a living out of feeding the horses, and there's other people making a living clearing their shit up behind them, and then there's other people upset that the roads are covered in shit, and so on and so forth. But in every case, there's some incumbent way of doing things with people with a vested interest involved in it, and then there are other people with a vested interest in the change. And the crux of all of this is no one should be caring whether super rich fossil fuel company executives are going to lose out. They're more than rich enough to look after themselves. The crucial thing in this transformation is to have good enough politics and governance that the less well off and the poorer people in the world who might fear that they're going to suffer in the transformation, that there's a so-called social safety net for them, because otherwise they are understandably blocking change with the yellow vest movement, or in the coal and rust belt in the US, or any other example you want to cite. But it's a totally solvable problem. It's just that's a call for good leadership, political leadership, basically, which is in frighteningly short supply in today's world.
Great question.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
Informative answer again, Tim. Really super quick, Paula, because we do need to go to breakout rooms, but I do want to go.
Well, I wanted to ask whether this reinforcing feedback of understanding how to self-propel industry change in the lubrication industry. They've already sussed that the electric cars don't need oils in the same way, so they've already changed their business model, but we're not hearing about that in the press. If there was much more in the news side, everybody talking about the changes in a positive way, then industry might gear up faster to anticipate how they can stay alive. Well,
bang on, Paula. So a lot of I talk about this to people like Damien Carrington at The Guardian, and he's really keen to cover these positive tipping point stories, and he's been trying, but in that case, it's about getting it past the editor, which he manages. But I couldn't agree more. The media, or whatever you want to think of them as, and opening the public discourse on this is crucial. That's why I'm here tonight. In a way, I'm not the media, but you know, I spend many of my evenings giving talks like this, trying to spread the word and get people talking about it, for exactly that reason. And yeah, the mechanics of this world, and I know a few of those, are rapidly worked out that they need to reinvent their jobs, and the car dealers are the same. What's, of course, we're quite good at innovating when we realize that our number might be up, and it's not actually necessarily an existential crisis. It's just for any of us, this transformation. But yeah, we need, if we're going to embrace it, yeah, that does mean sometimes embracing a different way of making a living, which we know people say that no one likes change, but actually I think it depends on the person. And there are some cases where change is already demonstrably better for like depressed communities in the northeast of this country that have been suffering ever since the loss of shipbuilding or coal mining or both. Suddenly building offshore wind turbines and installing them is bringing the real Green New Deal. And even conservative politicians who don't believe climate change is real are on board with that. So this can really help the dynamics, whatever you think about them and their motivations.
Thank you. Great question, Paula. Thank you, Tim. It feels like, going back to what you said, Tim, during your speech, it feels like we're all preparing the ground for that tipping point.
I hope so, Rob. Yeah, I feel that's why we're all here. But yeah, like I said, it just think about those virtuous cycles, those reinforcing feedback loops that can make the change self-propelling, because they do exist. I mean, I didn't mention Blue Planet 2 and the whole movement against ocean plastics, triggered by a total of 17 minutes out of 7 hours of broadcast time of that series. And look at the changes that came from those 17 minutes. Yeah. So there are lessons in here, and there's, yeah. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. There's so many questions I have. I've written so much down, but it's really really useful. Virtuous circles and self-propelling. We've got to look for those, and you've just given us one example in the Blue Planet, so I'm going to watch that tonight. Thank you. Remind myself. Sandra, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was wonderful, Tim. And I think if we could all just show our appreciation, because Tim may not be here when we all get back, but he might, we never know. But anyway, just to say thank you so much. And I'm going to put us pretty much straight into breakout rooms. There is a Dorset CAN facilitator in each room, with also help from Somerset CAN and Alan Heeks. If I asked you and you haven't been mentioned, thank you. Please just join in the discussion, and the facilitators, please join in as well. So the question in the breakout room is, how can we generate tipping points in our campaigns? What have we learned from what Tim said, and how can we start to spot the ones that are in our backyard, also in terms of public engagement? So I've promised to send back, I'm asking you to come back with 1 to 3 key points to share with the whole group. And we'll keep a record of those, and we'll send those to you, Tim, anyway, so that you have some response from us to your talk. So hopefully,
just a quick incentive, you could end up in the Guardian by the sounds of it.
You could end up in the Guardian. Well,
okay. Thumbs up from Tim.
I'm just hoping that the breakout rooms have held, and that I'm going to, some of them have got smaller because people are sneaking away.
Quick go, Sandra, stick
but
them
just
in.
enjoy the number and have a fabulous time.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, welcome back. Good to see so many of you still here.
Yeah, just wonderful. We've got 10 rooms, I think, to report back.
Brilliant. Yeah, 45 people still here. You are the committed ones. You're the ones that want to see real action. Great to see you all. I got so into my breakout room, and they just want to share one great slogan that was shared in my breakout room, and it was all you need is less. And this particular lady went along to a campaign, and there was lots of different slogans all around, but that was the thing that stuck in people's minds. And all you need is less. I can hear the Bob Marley singing it. It's just brilliant. And other things from my breakout room were you need to be on the winning side. And once you're, once you've created a winning side, which is the side I think that we're on now, is that there'll be that tipping point, and then everyone will start joining it. So yeah, I've come out of that really inspired. Thank you. Sandra, do you want, I'll keep time if you introduce the people in the rooms.
Yeah, okay. So can we have room 1? Whoever's Sonia's room, have you got 3 points?
Hi. Right, so we talked about cycling and switching to more sort of kind of active travel, and which was something that everyone in the room was quite keen on. And then there was also talking about switching to plant-based milks, and in order to find that tipping point, we realized what we really need to do is find the thing that speaks to people personally, rather than talking about climate change, which is that kind of broader out there thing. Talking to people, why would you want to switch? Because it speaks to your personal safety, your personal health, your personal finance. What's cheaper? So for like insulating your home as well, you wouldn't do it because you're wanting to save the planet. You do it because it's going to save you lots of money on your wallet, and possibly using famous local people to get the message across. And I think also, yeah, authentic local voices makes a huge difference, because when people can see that their neighbours are doing the same thing, so that using the authentic local voices to be the messenger.
That's fantastic, Sonia. Thank you. I'm going to have to wind you up there because of time, but that's great. That's a wonderful beginning points. Vicky, your room. Could we have 3 points?
Yeah, we might have slightly more than 3. Persistence. We're in the long game, so to get our tipping points, we have to stick at it. We need a really clear, single focus and simple, straightforward asks in our campaigns. Positivity is really vital to getting people engaged, and people saying that's why they had joined campaigns, because there were positive solutions that were being proposed. It's not all about stopping the bad stuff. And using your own network. So we had examples from churches, from documentary makers, where people were working within their own fields and networks to engage other people in the changes that we want to see.
Fantastic. Gosh, that's wonderful as well. Room 3.
Isn't it, Sandra, that there's so many golden opportunities? I think we could write a book or a pamphlet at the end of this. I just want to speak to the ones that Sonia did. Talk to people's personal benefits, famous, authentic local voices. That's such an important point. Excellent, love it.
Yes, really. And if the people giving the notes back could actually send them to me, that would be fantastic. Then I'll compile them and send them back to everybody else. So that would be great. Jenny, with room 3, do you have?
Yes, we do. So we talked about sort of what's current at the moment, pension fund investment. Certainly in Dorset, there was 5 million invested in Russian energy, which obviously the council are having a rethink now, and this could be a time for them perhaps to invest in green energy. Electric cars, feeling strongly that we're nearly at the tipping point there if the price comes down further, because there are there's about to be a big investment in more charging points. And we did talk about, yes, closing car parks so that people cycled instead, because they wouldn't have anywhere to park when they got to the town, or being paid to cycle, I think is the other option. And then renewable energy, community renewable energy, and alongside that, or as well, if there's large energy projects, like hopefully there will be another offshore wind farm project in Dorset, that could be a time when there's a tipping point towards people using more renewable energy.
Thanks very
Great
much.
point.
That's great. Really good local points there as well. Andrew, room 4. Do you have key points?
We talked about centres for depositing plastics, organic farming, energy saving and river pollution. And the I think the main thing we came up with is related to moving away, forgetting about seismic change and thinking about very small scale local change. And I think here we're near to nudge theory, and that would be something I'd be interested to hear more from Tim about. But so the two things are to focus on solutions, on what people can do and what they can do in their everyday lives, moving away from problems and obstacles and the things that just get us depressed and sort of stifle our feeling we can do anything. And secondly, to focus on the very small and local, and then go even smaller and more local. So to take it out of the town hall and into the scout hut or the pub or the school or the local group, so that people are talking to their peers rather than having others wheeled in or helicoptered in to talk to them.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So there are some themes emerging here in terms of personal and small is beautiful, which I think I've heard before somewhere, and yeah, and positive. That's fantastic. So room 5, Helen.
Yeah, hello. Interestingly, that was one of the comments that was made in ours was about people are weary of the climate emergency and so on, and want to, be talking about things that they can do. So we all found we were all talking about public engagement. That's things that we were all doing in my group. Judy mentioned about 3.5% of people being influenced is one of the things that XR looks at. And also Julian was saying about that there's 50% that don't want to be influenced, are just not interested. Then there's a certain percentage who already are doing things, and it's the 35% who are willing to be moved that we need to try and get across to. So it was it was about numbers from our side. And the sort of things, the approaches, that different approaches we were all taking was about questionnaires, about problems, and talking to people in the high street who would actually come up and talk to you. Drop-in day, just focusing on 4 different things: PV, batteries, air source heat pumps, and electric cars. And just focusing on those, and people would come. And because electricity and gas are going to get really expensive, people are much more focused because it's important to them in terms of the money that they're having to spend out. So they got 40 people in a relatively small village to come along and talk to them about these things. And then climate emergency centres about the other thing to try and push the public engagement. That's something that they're looking to do in Swindon. So really from our group, it was really about numbers. And apparently there is a statistic about it's 50% of the work we have to do is actually by individuals, that 50% of the change. So while governments and businesses need to do things, there's also an awful lot that we can actually do individually, and we can persuade other people to do. So influencing our peers to make those changes and make that tipping point happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Helen. That's really good to remember that we need to do 50% at least of the change. And
also, Julian's put in the chat a link to what's his climate emergency centre and what they're doing in terms of hitting that tipping point as well.
Fantastic.
So there's some there to some further information. That's Julian Jones has popped that in there. Take the jump.
Great, thank you. And Kaz has put in a mention about climate outreach as well, and I'll save the chat so it'll be available for people. Thank you, Helen. And Colin, room 6.
We had so many ideas. I'm going to have to write my own little report and send it to you, I think.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
But there was one of the main things that stuck out for me was how to make the complicated simple. And one of the things that struck us about Tim's talk was how some of the diagrams are really straightforward, really easy to understand. And this is all in relationship to the Dorset Open Homes, by the way. So how can we sort of take that and use that within our publicity and so on? Well, one of the other points that came up was about how to make things trendy. So, for example, there's a trend now for homes to be installing electric vehicle chargers, but how to kind of expand on that and actually make it into a trend, or make it trendy for people to do it. There's quite a lot about the cheaper end of retrofitting a home, and how to work with that rather than the especially with the focus on fuel poverty, how to focus on what's much more easily done, fairly cheap or free, in terms of making sure that we let people know about what grants are about, because there are still grants about, for certainly for insulation and quite a few other retrofitting things. So I think that's 3. I'll stop
Thanks,
there.
Colin. Thanks very much. That's great. Room 7, Ian.
Hi, Sandra. Yeah, well, I had the smallest breakout room I've ever been in. There were only 3 of us. Fortunately, 2 of them came from the Wimborne area who didn't know each other, so I was able to introduce Michael to Mick and Mick to Michael. And that's a valuable link they've now made in the area of Planet Wimborne. But in terms of the actual question, we spent some time talking about alternative ways of looking at tipping points, because I'd always used the term critical mass, and I think Mick had said that he'd used escape velocity and things like that. So there are other ways of looking at that same concept. But in terms of the campaigns, we thought that probably in the Dorset Deserves Better, the critical mass would be a certain proportion of town and parish councils being signatories, because after that point, the Dorset Council have really got to pay attention, because they've got a huge amount of interest from the local authorities. And in terms of GBDH, possibly getting a major landowner on our side might be a help.
Excellent, thank you. That's wonderful. So we're going to have to go really quickly now, because we're going a little bit over time. And so room 8, Julie, and then room 9, Alan.
So as Rob said, there was Rachel's "All You Need Is Less," which I think's John Lennon. All you need is love. And then it's being on the winning side, really key to people, being on the winning side, and it appeals to driven people. Being on the popular side, again, that's that sort of feeling that we're all together in something. Having a vested interest was another phrase that came up, so that'll make the difference. And really talking to young people, getting the buy-in, that'll be a tipping point hugely for moving everything forwards.
Thank you, Julie. Yes, good to bring that in as well. Alan, could you give us the points from room 9 and then room 10?
Well, in the interest of brevity, some of our points have already been covered. I think the main one I'd highlight was Belinda talking about her success in getting the Lyme Regis Town Council from a position being very reactionary to actually, voting £75,000 to support climate work. And the really interesting thing was to actually train up and educate the usual suspects, and then they started to persuade the non-usual suspects. And I think a lot of us struggle with how you get beyond the usual suspects. So that, I think, is a great idea. And she's already put in the chat that the key tool she used was the carbon literacy training. And she's put the website there, and Belinda's offering to help other people if they want to work on it, I think particularly with their town parish councillors. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Alan. Thanks for facilitating for us this evening. That's great. And Tracy, room 10.
I think we beat you, Ian, on the smallest room. Actually, it was just 2 of us, but Sandra popped in for a bit, which was very kind of her. I think we kind of came up with identifying, I've written it down, so I shall pop it in the chat afterwards. Identifying and creating conditions for the mobility to change. So by that, we were talking about setting up a climate and emergency centre in Weymouth, and sort of parts on a timeline where you would identify a condition which would help to facilitate that change. So one of those points might be getting people to help get it off the ground. Another point might be opening it, and so on and so forth. Also, we had feedback loop. So we've kind of got an addendum to that, which is the media channels as an enabler to that feedback loop. But the feedback can obviously come through whatever means, but just feeding back in all the time to what you're doing and making sure you keep creating those conditions and changing them accordingly. And finally, foundation blocks. So having a good foundation to support you, whether that be your mission statement or your people on the ground or whatever. So I'll put them all in the chat now.
Thanks very much, Casey. That's fantastic. Well, it's just wonderful to hear that number of ideas. Rob, handing over to you.
Yeah, what I'm struck by is, when we all started together in Zoom 3 years ago, there was a lot of enthusiasm, but my sense is we didn't really know what we were doing or how we were going to do it so much. Whereas now what I'm hearing is kind of the repetition of the same consistent themes and a real knowledge base around what works and what doesn't work. And we've got a bank of experienced people now that have run successful campaigns. And I've just loved it. It feels like when you go to a conference and you just share all these fantastic ideas, you get energized and psyched up, and you wake up in the morning with more energy and more ideas and ready for action. And this is what these are all about, is to kind of blow wind in your sails and to feel supported and know you're not alone. And there are loads of fantastic people out there, bright people, hardworking people that are making a difference. And we're part of that rich social history of people making change, but being in the minority, but eventually being on the right side of history and being part of that popular movement. And we've seen that, haven't we? You know, if we go back to 2019, before Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion and David Attenborough coming off the fence finally, climate change wasn't mainstream. We were still shouting about it. It is mainstream now. It's in all the newspapers. It's on all of the channels, like right wing, left wing. It's there. What the next stage now is the solutions. What do we do? People believe in it now. So, you know, well done for getting to this stage is what I'm saying to you all. And it's fantastic to all be in a virtual room together again. I've written about 8 pages of notes here. I've taken just as much from the feedback from the breakout rooms as I have from Professor Tim Lenton as well. So yeah, really, really worthwhile. Thank you all. A few quick plugs. Please sign up to Dorset CAN to become a Dorset CAN member, organisation or individual. It costs absolutely nothing. And I keep coming back to, I think membership is mandate. You know, if we can say, like Giles did at the start, that his Dorset Deserves Better campaign represents 18% of the Dorset population, that's a mandate. And if we can say we've got a network of people that represent 30, 40, 50% of Dorset, and we're rocking up to MPs and councillors and business saying, we represent your consumers, your constituents, they're going to listen to us. And if you're a member, you can all get in the same room together. We're not going to agree about everything. That's unrealistic. But if we can agree about a couple of key things, that's power, that's clout. And that's what we want to achieve here. We're a network. It's non-hierarchical. Come along, throw your ideas in. We'll have a chat and we'll agree what we do going forwards. And yeah, if you want to donate money as well, that would be super. We're fundraising for a permanent pay coordinator like Somerset CAN have. Sonia's here actually for Somerset CAN. Can you just quickly, 20 seconds, talk about the impact that having a pay coordinator is having on Somerset CAN in terms of progressing its aims? I'll put you on the spot.
Wow, okay.
Because we want one of you at Dorset CAN, basically, because we're all overworked.
but well, I think that was the point. I think when Somerset CAN directors came together to form Somerset CAN, realizing that they needed an umbrella organisation to bring all of the amazing ground roots groups together, so that you could share best practice and just encourage each other with the feedback, like you've just done tonight. I mean, it's brilliant hearing all of those great stories going around tonight. But it's a lot of work, and it does need one person to pull it all together, and it certainly means that I feel much more obliged to get this done, because I know that, you know, I'm getting paid, and I kind of, you know, I'll feel guilty if I don't, even though, so, you know, and I'm running the Somerset Rail to Trail project. I do that for free, but that's my baby. But I will put the Somerset CAN work first, because you know, there's a salary coming, and that's so it does make a difference. And it just, you know, I've put the time aside to make sure that the topics that the network are really interested in get covered, and when people ask for, you know, whatever support that they need, that I do the investigation and bring that together, if I can.
Thank you.
But I'm also, I'd just like to do a very quick plug before we go. We had a great meeting just the other day. Wiltshire Climate Alliance have got a youth conference that they're planning, and they've invited both Dorset Climate Action and Somerset Climate Action to take part in the next one, which is going to be really soon. And we've kind of got an idea. We'll have to be run by the kids that get involved. I've put a call out to see how many young folk will be interested to be on board. But what we'd like to do is to maybe pit the separate county councils against each other, and get the young folk to do some research to say, you know what, Somerset's performing really well on transport. Well, we're not actually, we're performing really badly on transport. Let's say Dorset's performing much better. How do you propose to level up with Dorset? That's what I'd like to see our MPs being quizzed on as we go forward. So looking forward to that. Yeah, please encourage your children, grandchildren to get involved.
Thank you.
If you can find an amenable county councillor, you'll be lucky.
So yeah, we're collaborating with Somerset CAN and Wiltshire Climate Alliance to do events together. We're planning to have a big kind of face-to-face meeting at some stage in a field, I'm sure, camping, music, and just have a good old knees up. So watch this space. Right, that's all for this evening. We've got the virtual pub next. The invitation next is to demute. And after 3 weeks, we shout stronger together, just because it feels bloody good to hear a load of people shout stronger together. If you don't want to do it, there's no pressure. This isn't a cult, but we like to do it because it feels great. So if you'd like to unmute, we're going to count down, and we're all going to cheer strong together, and then off you go into the night, energized to do more. 3, 2, 1. Stronger together! Thank you so much, everyone. Particularly Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. Brilliant.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra.
And do stick on for the pub if you'd like. Grab a drink, some food, and see you in about 30 seconds.
Bye. Oh.
Sandra, do you want to kick things off as the landlady?
Somebody
say pub.
I'll see if anybody will get me a drink.
It's all gone.
Oh, it's all gone. Oh, well, yes, mine's all gone.
Mine's empty too.
I'm from Wiltshire, by the way, Wiltshire Climate Alliance. Andrew from West.
Oh, great. Hi, Andrew. Nice to see you.
Yeah, me too.
Where are you from? Where did you say you're from?
Bradford-on-Avon in West Wiltshire, between Trowbridge and Bath.
I was brought up at Wingfield.
Okay.
A mile down the road.
Right.
I was brought up in Warminster, so not far away.
We've got a lot of moonrakers here tonight then.
I
live in
Devizes.
Yeah, we
I
we're
was
working
brought up
on.
in South London.
I saw the light and moved to South London.
Oh yeah, which bit?
Oh, Brixton.
Ah,
Yeah, it was a riot.
Rains Park.
Has-
2
has
miles
Lon-
from Wimbledon.
Has anybody in London doing anything about the climate?
Well, there's a big thing, as I say, coming up in Hyde Park on the 9th with Extinction Rebellion. You know, if you want to go along to Hyde Park on 10 o'clock on the 9th of April, and they'll take it from there. It could go on for a week. So about 3 or 4 of us are going out from Wimborne. But I'm hoping to stay with my son, who's really wants to keep very quiet about it. He's in Streatham Hill, but yeah. He just doesn't want me to get arrested, that's all. But I won't do that.
It's probably the role reversal now, isn't it? He's making sure his mum doesn't break the law.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I'm trying to change, you know, save the world for future generations, and he's just not interested. It's terribly sad, you know. And he's 33 now. I mean, he thinks we just can't make a difference, you know. So it's a shame, but I do everything I can. But there we are. I think, yeah. Someone, I can't remember who it was talking about. Was it Bridport? Someone was talking about trying to get things going, you know, get more volunteers involved. Certainly in Wimborne, we used to have, I think Extinction Rebellion started off, and then a few people perhaps didn't want to get involved in actions. And there is something called Planet Wimborne now, which I think they took the idea from Blandford or Shaftesbury. So that's sort of an umbrella for lots of different voluntary organisations that do things like Win on Waste and War on Waste and the Fair Trade Shop and quite a lot of other little things. So maybe I've forgotten who it was.
Might be
in Bridport. Maybe he could speak to them.
Maybe that was Alan Heaps.
Alan Heaps.
It was Alan.
Yeah.
Who was the Planet Wimborne person?
I'm not sure if there was anyone from Planet. Oh, there was somebody. Was there somebody from Planet Wimborne tonight? I'm not sure.
Yeah, there
I
was.
recognise. I think Hilary Palmer is also from Exile Wimborne. But you know, it's a shame they've sort of split into 2 camps, really. But I understand, you know, they don't necessarily want to get involved in actions. I mean, it's not for everyone. But I mean, we're Wimborne being so conservative. You know, we're very quiet about things generally.
We need help in Wiltshire from people who are familiar with the A350, where we're trying to stop Wiltshire and Dorset councils of developing and upgrading that road to make a link between the M4 and so-called the South Coast ports. So anyone who knows Poole, anyone who's on at Wimborne or any of those other towns up and down the A350, it'd be great if they could email transport@wiltshireclimatealliance.org.uk. Things like they're using the existence of Poole as an excuse to make a gigantic dual carriageway through Wiltshire, when in fact trade shipping through Poole Harbour, I think, has been declining over a very long period, and it looks like not much more than a marina to me. With a ferry, of course. Good. Hello, here's someone from Poole. And I think there's some ecologically important things like seagrass, aren't there, in the water there?
Oh, there's seahorses on the seagrass in Studland Bay. Yeah, I mean, there are, you know, passenger ferries that go across over from Poole to.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure where they go now. It's so long since I've been on one, but I think they certainly go to the Channel Islands and possibly France as well.
And France, yeah. Can I bring in Felicity and then Kaz, please? Thank you, Judy.
Yeah, well, there are seahorses in Poole. When the lockdowns were on, people would see them actually coming up to the beaches in Poole, because there was nothing disrupting the water. Yes, well, there was lots of roadworks done with the Dorset LEP funding movement of lorries from the Poole port out through sort of Poole with the idea that it would go into England somewhere all by road rather than thinking about rail or anything else. But I've sort of lost track of it recently. There's the Western Sub-Regional Transport Board or something like that. Is that what you're talking about? That's where the money's coming from?
Yeah, partly, yes. And Highways England, or what national highways they've changed their name to.
Yeah.
They've invited us they've invited us to put a case to them whether there should be a massive dual carriageway between the M4 and Poole for you to ride your seahorse.